But I told you that story earlier, Sue, when you were singing, of how this old people's choir came to the prison one Christmas.
Jim Bakker, a well-known televangelist and pastor, has long been a polarizing figure in the world of faith-based television and ministry. Recently, he has stirred controversy yet again with his bold declaration, "You've been lied to about churches." This time, Bakker is using his platform to shed light on a troubling issue: misconduct within churches, particularly concerning the mistreatment of young individuals and women by certain clergy members. For years, the global Christian community has grappled with scandals involving priests and pastors misusing their power. These scandals often involve the mistreatment of young people and women, raising questions about accountability and transparency in religious institutions. Bakker's recent statements echo the growing sentiment that the church, while a place of worship and refuge, is not immune to corruption and misconduct. Bakker, speaking on his television program, called out a systemic failure within some church organizations. "There are wolves in sheep's clothing," he said, emphasizing that these perpetrators exploit their positions of trust to commit acts that are both criminal and morally reprehensible. Bakker's revelations are not just about exposing wrongdoings, they are also about giving a voice to the victims. Many individuals who have suffered mistreatment at the hands of church leaders often remain silent due to fear, shame, or lack of support. By addressing this issue publicly, Bakker hopes to encourage victims to come forward and seek justice. He also called for stricter accountability measures within churches, urging religious organizations to prioritize the safety of their congregants over protecting their reputation. "The church should be a sanctuary, not a place of fear," Bakker remarked, emphasizing the need for transparency and independent investigations into allegations of misconduct. While some critics argue that Jim Bakker's past controversies, such as his conviction for fraud in the 1980s, undermine his credibility, others believe his words carry weight precisely because he has experienced the consequences of moral failings firsthand. Bakker's decision to tackle such a sensitive issue reflects a growing acknowledgement within faith communities that these problems can no longer be swept under the rug. Bakker's statements have sparked mixed reactions within the Christian community. Some religious leaders have praised his courage for addressing a deeply uncomfortable issue, while others accuse him of sensationalizing the problem for personal gain. Regardless, his comments have reignited discussions about the need for reform within church institutions to prevent misconduct and restore trust among congregants. As Bakker continues to shine a light on these issues, the hope is that his efforts will lead to meaningful change. By bringing attention to the mistreatment of young individuals and women in churches, Bakker is challenging religious organizations to confront their flaws and take proactive steps to protect the vulnerable. His message is clear: faith should uplift and empower, not harm or exploit. Whether or not Jim Bakker's controversial past clouds his message, the conversation he's sparked is an essential one, demanding accountability from an institution many hold sacred. Church leaders who neglect to act against shady priests contribute to the harm endured by victims, serving as a further source of evil, according to the Vatican's Child Protection Commission, which has called for their removal from office. In its inaugural report on a decades-long scandal engulfing the Catholic Church, the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors revealed ongoing failures in addressing clerical misconduct cases effectively. The Commission also condemned the Vatican office responsible for handling complaints, accusing it of sluggishness and a lack of transparency. Established by Pope Francis in 2014, the Commission released its first report on Tuesday, spotlighting church protocols across 17 nations. The report's release follows sharp criticism directed at the pontiff just a month earlier by Belgium's King Philippe, and Prime Minister Alexander De Croo, who condemned the Church's handling of misconduct during the Pope's visit to their country. The report said, "Over its 10 years of service, the Commission has seen Church leaders being the object of past administrative actions and/or inactions which were a further source of evil for victims, survivors of misconduct. Such a reality reveals the need for a disciplinary or administrative procedure, providing an efficient path towards the resignation or removal from a post." The report further emphasized that survivors deserve improved access to information regarding their cases. It underscored the need for compensation to be seen as a tangible step toward fostering their healing. Importantly, this compensation should extend beyond monetary support, incorporating meaningful actions like acknowledging past mistakes and offering public apologies.
Reconciling the Church and those abused by it. That was the goal of Pope Francis's first day at the Catholic Church's World Youth Day Festival in Lisbon. On Wednesday, he met with 13 survivors of the Portuguese clergy's sexual abuse and condemned Portugal's Catholic Church leaders for the scandal.
During a news conference, the Commission's head, Cardinal Sion O'Malley, stated that the Church had been forced to face its history of terrible misconduct because of journalists, and that the report was the first step in its firm commitment to ensure these events never happen again. "Nothing we do will ever be enough to fully repair what has happened," he said. Anne Barrett Doyle, a co-founder of Bishop Accountability, a watchdog that tracks clergy cases, said that while there were commendable aspects of the report, it assesses window dressing rather than the reality on the ground. Doyle added, "It doesn't focus on the central and devastating realities that children in the Catholic Church are still being mistreated by clergy, and that universal church law still allows these priests to be reinstated if certain conditions are met. It doesn't decry the fact that the process for reporting and investigating complicity is flawed, rife with conflict of interest and secrecy." Doyle acknowledged that the Commission was hampered by its limited purpose. "It is not allowed to examine specific cases," she said, adding, "The absurdity of this limitation, which surely is no accident, is that the Commission cannot possibly do a true audit. The only safeguarding test that matters is whether bishops are removing accusers. This report doesn't address that, because the Commission itself is powerless to do so." Meanwhile, the Center for Catholic Studies has released a new report that supports this. This statistic is also supported by a decline in monetary contributions, with 1/3 of Catholics who once gave money to the Church no longer doing so. A YouGov survey gathered responses from over 3,000 self-identified Roman Catholic adults. The findings reveal that 79%, more than 3/4, believe the Church must undergo significant reforms to curb future incidents of misconduct. The sample reflected the diversity of the Catholic population in England and Wales. It encompassed regular churchgoers who attend services at least once a month, occasional attendees visiting less frequently, and individuals who identify as Catholic despite not participating in Mass. The survey indicates that the misconduct scandal has directly driven many to intentionally distance themselves from the Church, as reflected in declining Mass attendance and reduced financial contributions. Nonetheless, the results of the poll indicate that frequent churchgoers see the Church more favorably than non-attendees. Regular attendees of Mass were notably more inclined to perceive misconduct within the Church as a relic of the past, with 32% holding this view compared to only 17% of those who never attend. Additionally, frequent Mass goers were more likely to believe that the prevalence of misconduct in the Church is comparable to that in other child-focused institutions, with 48% sharing this perspective versus 41% among non-attendees. Among regular Mass attendees, who are somewhat familiar with the Catholic Bishops' Conference of England and Wales's response to cases, 32% believe the bishops have managed these matters poorly. Pope Francis's efforts to address misconduct cases are more widely recognized and receive greater approval compared to the actions taken by individual diocesan bishops or the collective response of the bishops of England and Wales. This report is a component of a broader research initiative titled Boundary Breaking, which explores the impact of the misconduct crisis on the Catholic community. The 4-year study highlights that certain cultural elements and practices within the Catholic Church have played a role in the occurrence of clerical misconduct. In order to compensate hundreds of victims of decades-old clerical misconduct, the Archdiocese of Los Angeles has agreed to pay $880 million. According to experts, the agreement involving 353 individuals who claim to have been mistreated by Catholic priests in the area marks the largest misconduct settlement with a Catholic archdiocese. The accusers were granted the opportunity to file lawsuits after California passed a law in 2020, which created a 3-year window, allowing cases that had previously surpassed the statute of limitations to be heard. The Archdiocese of Los Angeles has already disbursed $740 million to victims. Following the settlement revealed on Wednesday, the total compensation will exceed $1.5 billion. According to the Plaintiffs' Liaison Committee, attorneys must still obtain consent from each plaintiff in order to complete the settlement. The settlement resolves the majority of claims against the largest archdiocese in the U.S., although several lawsuits remain unresolved, according to the victims' attorneys. Here are some things to know about the settlement. Lead plaintiff lawyer Morgan Stewart said Thursday that talks started in 2022. Stewart explained that attorneys aim to secure the largest possible settlement for their clients, while also ensuring the financial survival of the archdiocese. California is among over 15 states that have extended the statute of limitations for claims, resulting in thousands of new lawsuits. This surge has led several archdioceses, including those in San Francisco and Oakland, to file for bankruptcy. Triple damages were also permitted by California law in situations where an employee or volunteer covered up prior misconducts. One of our goals was to avoid the bankruptcy process that has befallen so many other dioceses, Stewart said. According to Stewart, the plaintiffs suffered misconduct 30, 40, or 50 years ago. These survivors have suffered for decades in the aftermath of the misconduct, Stewart told the Los Angeles Times. He further added, "Dozens of the survivors have died. They are aging, and many of those with knowledge of the misconduct within the church are too. It was time to get this resolved." The Archdiocese has paid hundreds of millions of dollars in settlements and promised to better protect its church members. In a statement, Archbishop Jose H. Gomez expressed regret, saying, "My hope is that this settlement will provide some measure of healing for what these men and women have suffered." The Archbishop added, "I believe that we have come to a resolution of these claims that will provide just compensation to the survivor victims of these past misconduct." Gomez said that the new settlement would be paid through reserves, investments, and loans, along with other archdiocesan assets and payments that will be made by religious orders and others named in the litigation. Over 300 priests who served in the Los Angeles Archdiocese have been charged with decades of mistreatment of young ones. Among those priests was Michael Bakker, convicted of misconduct in 2007 and released on parole in 2011. By 2013, the Archdiocese had agreed to a nearly $10 million settlement for 4 cases that accused the now defrocked priest of misconduct. Bakker met with then Archbishop Roger Mahoney in 1986 and admitted to mistreating 2 boys over a span of about 7 years, according to confidential documents. Mahoney dismissed Bakker from ministry and ordered psychological treatment, yet the priest returned to service and was permitted to have unsupervised contact with boys. It wasn't until 2000, after he had served in 9 different parishes, that Bakker was finally removed from ministry. According to the Los Angeles Times, authorities suspect Bakker of misconduct of over 40 minors during his tenure as a priest. Gomez, who took over as Archbishop of Los Angeles following Mahony's retirement in 2011, stated that the church now implements rigorous background checks and reporting protocols for priests. Additionally, there are comprehensive training programs in place for staff and volunteers to safeguard young people. Despite his retirement, Mahony continues to hold the title of cardinal. Gomez told the Los Angeles Times, "Today, as a result of these reforms, new cases of misconduct by priests and clergy involving minors are rare in the archdiocese. No one who has been found to have harmed a minor is serving in ministry at this time, and I promise we will remain vigilant." The archdiocese will release additional papers it maintained that detailed clergy misconduct as part of the New Deal. I'm not excusing anything, but the fact remains that today the archdiocese is a much, much different place than it was 40, 50, 60 years ago, said Kirk Dillman, an attorney representing the archdiocese. Kirk added, "The understanding of misconduct is much different and more sophisticated than it was then. So we have put in place programs beginning in the 1990s, zero-tolerance policy." Meanwhile, the cover-up failed in the case of retired Catholic priest Lawrence Hecker. However, it wasn't due to any shortage of effort from a group of influential church leaders and supportive judges, who consistently placed the predator's well-being above the pursuit of justice for his countless victims. It wasn't until the evidence against him became irrefutable that, rather than endure the shame of a public trial, he chose to plead guilty last Tuesday. The 93-year-old's choice didn't just result in an automatic life sentence, it also shed light on the Catholic officials in Hecker's hometown of New Orleans, a key stronghold of the church in the U.S., who repeated the same transgressions that had sparked a chillingly similar scandal in Boston 2 decades prior. Events that would later be immortalized in the Academy Award-winning film Spotlight. After years of investigating and analyzing church files, court records, legal documents, and law enforcement reports, one inescapable conclusion emerges. Hecker's relentless campaign of terror devastated countless children in one of the last remaining regions of the United States known for its unwavering Catholic identity. According to documents kept by the Catholic Archdiocese of New Orleans, Hecker began mistreating young people almost immediately after being ordained in 1958. According to chronology, one of Hecker's first victims was an altar boy in his preteen years, who told of going to the priest's nude swimming parties, which would end with the attacker mistreating him. Eventually, Hecker told that youngster to deliver a box with a feather to a specific fellow priest at a different Catholic church and school in the area. The youngster was mistreated by the second priest shortly after, and the victim claimed he realized Hecker had used the feather to identify him as a target for misconduct. It came as no surprise that Hecker's superiors quickly became aware of his crimes. As the U.S. Church grappled with the growing scandal of Catholic clergy misconduct, accusations against him accumulated at every significant moment in the reckoning. Beginning in the 1980s, when Louisiana priest Gilbert Gauth pleaded guilty to mistreating several boys in criminal court. Around that time, Archbishop Philip Hannon of New Orleans received a misconduct allegation against Hecker. In response, Hannon handled the matter privately, arranging for Hecker to take a sabbatical in New York City. Once tensions settled back home, Hecker was allowed to return to his duties. In the 1990s, additional allegations emerged against Hecker, coinciding with the conviction of another Louisiana priest, Robert Melanson, who was found guilty of mistreating an altar boy. This increased scrutiny led Hecker to admit in writing to church officials that he had mistreated several young ones he encountered through his ministry. This time, Francis Schulte Hannon's successor as archbishop, took charge of the response. Schulte sent Hecker to an out-of-state psychiatric facility, where he was diagnosed as an incurable offender, unfit to work with children. Despite this, when Hecker returned, Schulte reassigned him to a church that had an attached grammar school. Hecker was forced into retirement in 2002, a year marked by upheaval. As Spotlight vividly documented, the Boston Globe had just revealed the Catholic Archdiocese's cover-up of widespread misconduct by its clergy, sparking a scandal that led the global church to pledge reforms, including a commitment to no longer tolerate figures like Hecker. Despite promises of transparency, New Orleans Archbishop Alfred Hughes chose to conceal from the congregation that Hecker had retired, likely to hide the truth about his history as a serial offender. At the time, archdiocesan attorneys sent a confidential memo to the police, alerting them to an accusation naming Hecker as a mistreater. However, the memo only referenced one case and failed to mention Hecker's confessions in 1999. Additionally, Hughes disregarded his advisor's recommendation to remove Hecker permanently from the priesthood, opting instead to let him retire, which allowed the clergyman to secure generous retirement benefits. Such maneuvers were on brand for Hughes, who had worked as an administrator in Boston's archdiocese in the 1980s and 1990s and sought to perpetuate a practice of utmost secrecy and confidentiality with respect to the problem of clerical misconduct in that city. A report from the Massachusetts Attorney General's office ultimately found the manipulation proved successful in further obscuring the truth about Hecker, allowing him to remain free for decades. Meanwhile, Gregory Amond, Hughes's successor as Archbishop of New Orleans, continued addressing the priest's crimes after his appointment in 2009. In 2012, Amond approved a $37,000 payment to settle an out-of-court dispute with a former altar boy who accused Hecker of misconduct. However, Amond chose not to expose Hecker as an offender until many years later. In fact, as recently as April 2018, the Archdiocese proudly celebrated the upcoming 60th anniversary of Hecker's ordination in its newspaper. Approximately 7 months following the jubilant announcement, a grand jury report in Pennsylvania revealed that clergy misconduct within the state's Catholic institutions was far more extensive than previously realized. It was then that Amond finally acknowledged he could no longer fully conceal Hecker's past. The Archbishop revealed his name in a list of numerous local clergy members accused of serious and credible misconduct. Yet the list offered no specifics on the number of allegations against Hecker or the time frame in which they occurred. The New Orleans Archdiocese, facing numerous misconduct allegations against its personnel, both those named on the clergy offender list and others, was ultimately forced to seek bankruptcy protection in 2020. In theory, the bankruptcy filing should have served as a metaphorical vault, sealing away the truth about Hecker, as the majority of information tied to the case was shielded by a blanket confidentiality order. Federal Judge Meredith Grable, overseeing the church's bankruptcy case, once determined that the confidentiality of case-related information was so inviolable that it could not be breached, even in connection to Hecker and his alleged criminal activities. In reaching that decision, Grable said she intended to destroy any sealed information that this court received, while litigating the issue about whether Hecker deserved to benefit from the bankruptcy's secrecy. Still, the truth got out. So, that's all from today's video. If you enjoyed it, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and ring that bell icon so you never miss our upcoming videos. And don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks.